Hey everybody, John from Discover RC. Thanks for joining me. Today I have a look at a kind of interesting little quadcopter. This is the HPHELI Aerocraft micro quadcopter. I recently got this on sale from the Hobby People website and basically got it because it just looks kind of funky. And I thought, wow, kind of interesting looking little quadcopter. I don't know how it flies, no idea, but I'm kind of sold just on the looks. It kind of looks like you took a bug, got it together with a Bugatti, and then somehow threw in some DNA from Lost in Space. And you've got this kind of egg-shaped central pod with the roof rails and the spoiler in the back, and then these kind of interesting arms that are actually angled downwards. They're fairly flexible. I've crashed it a few times, haven't broken anything. And even the plastic has this kind of glitter to it. I don't know if you can see it if I hold it up close, but it's got this kind of sparkly glitter to it, which is another kind of interesting feature of the little quadcopter. In the box you get the quadcopter 2.4 gigahertz transmitter, single cell 300 milliamp battery pack, USB charger, spare props, and instructions. And the battery goes right in the bottom right here. There's a little battery compartment. Pop the latch right off, and there's your 300 milliamp single cell pack. Fairly tight fit, but not too hard to get everything in there. And then you have an on-off switch in the back. LED lights front and back, white LEDs in the front, blue LEDs in the back. And you can see the LED is kind of recessed in that motor pod right there. And at nighttime you can see everything very clearly, easy to fly in pitch black. In the daytime, not so much, and also the motor pod does tend to block the LED. At night the light will diffuse around the motor pod so you can still see it, but in the daytime a lot of times it's going to be blocked. Other than that, there's the quadcopter, guys. Pretty interesting little design. Alright, let's talk about the transmitter, guys. You do need 6 AA batteries for this transmitter. Otherwise it has a pretty nice feel. It's actually a pretty decent transmitter considering this is an inexpensive micro quadcopter. It's got pretty good weight, pretty good feel in the hands. The stick movement is decent. It's not outstanding, but it's not bad. You've got your trim tabs, on-off switch, flip button up here, and your speed button up here. So talking about the flip button, to flip the quadcopter, you actually have to hold the flip button down and then initiate the flip in the roll or the pitch axis. Most quadcopters this size, you push the button, you get a beep or series of beeps, and then you do the flip. This one you have to hold it down and flip. So it's a little bit awkward. It also makes it harder to do quick flips in a row because you have to hold it down, flip, hold it down, flip. You can't just keep punching it and flipping like you can with a lot of the other micro quadcopters of this range. Speed button up here, you have 3 different speeds, guys. So you have low, middle, and high. When you first start the quadcopter, it's going to be in the low speed mode, and it is really, really low. It's pretty much glacial. In fact, the yaw is about as slow as I've ever seen. It yaws about like this. But it is enough to fly the quadcopter. When I first flew it that way, I thought, anyone who's flown a quadcopter is going to find this ridiculously slow and unresponsive and is not going to like it. And I think that's the case if you're used to flying quadcopters. However, if you are learning to fly a quadcopter, I actually think it's pretty good. It is the most docile quadcopter I've ever flown in this size. No question about it. It's got good self-leveling. It doesn't drift too much. Every quadcopter is going to drift a little bit. It has a little bit of drift to it, so you have to self-correct a little bit. But the low-end control, it's got enough to fly it. You can fly it indoors. You have enough to control it, but it's going to be hard to over-control it. So I think it's actually very good for a beginner. It's a good way to start. This quadcopter will be very stable, hard to crash. It can probably take a crash too. I've crashed it a few times, as I mentioned, but that low speed mode, I think it's actually pretty good. The middle mode gives you more bank angle, and it's not really speed we're talking about. You're not increasing the motor speed or anything. You're just increasing the bank angle so you can fly faster because of that. The middle mode is good for indoors or outdoors. It's a good intermediate step, so once you're comfortable flying it in the low speed mode, bump it up to the middle mode and fly more aggressively. And then you've got the high speed mode, which gives you more bank angle, more speed, and that's better for outside, I think, unless you're in a large indoor area. With the high speed mode, I did find it a little hard to carve nice turns. The yaw was, not quite as fast as I'd want it to be, and yet it didn't quite feel proportional. So when I go into a turn, I found that I was over yawing it and just kind of skidding out of the turn rather than doing a nice, smooth turn. So definitely can fly it fast forward, back, side to side, but I was having a little trouble getting the nice smooth turns out of it. But still, overall pretty good. All 3 modes are self-leveling, so there's no manual mode on this. I wish it did have a manual mode. That's always fun to fly. The flips themselves are pretty tight. It does nice tight flips. When you flip it, you do lose a little altitude. You have to be on the throttle, and you can flip it without losing too much altitude if you get the throttle adjustment just right. The charge time for the single cell 300 milliamp pack is approximately half an hour, and I was getting about 5 to 6 minutes of flight time per charge. You don't have any headless mode or orientation mode with this quadcopter, which is good because I can't stand that. on these little quadcopters. So no headless mode, which is nice. After this thing hits the low voltage cutoff, you get about 5 seconds of flashing lights, and then the thing just drops out of the sky. So once you see those flashing lights, be sure to land. All right, guys, every time you turn on the quadcopter, it will calibrate the gyro. So you want to have it on a level surface. Go ahead and turn on the transmitter, and then turn on the quadcopter, and you'll see this flashing red light right there. And then once that starts going to a slower flash, you've calibrated. Then just move your throttle stick to the top and back down. And now you're armed and ready to fly. All right, guys, there's a look at the Hobby People Aerocraft Micro Quadcopter. Thanks for checking it out. Pretty interesting little quadcopter. I got it just because it looks kind of funky, but does fly pretty decently. They actually have a bigger version with a camera, but I like this one. I wish it had a manual mode, and I wish the flip button was press and release. Other than that, pretty decent little quad. Thanks for watching, guys. Any questions or comments, please post below, and I'll see you next time.